My name is Elke Krasny, and I work at the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna as a professor. And my work focuses on art, architecture, urbanism, and questions of care at this point in time when we are faced with climate change and also the pandemic catastrophe. And we have gathered here upon the invitation of Gabi and have just had a conversation on this stone structure here that is a democratic sculpture. I think I want to jump into a little different direction, I guess. So when I think about pieces like this one that invite people to do and to be, so both. I mean, so you can be here and you can do things, and you can express your agency or your idleness, or so you can find expression that becomes part of the public scape, which a park stands for.
My name is Elena Cologni. I'm an artist and I'm based in Cambridge. The workshop that we are about to do is part of a project which is called The Body of at Work, and it sort of started with a bigger project that was presented in Venice. There are some sort of basic elements of the whole project, but I think that what is relevant for us today is to think about two elements of it. One is the issue of place attachment, so how we become attached to a place. And the second is the element of distance. No, nobody's fine. The current work is sort of revolves around issues of care that refer back to care ethics, which is a context of philosophy that developed in the 80s in New York, and it referred specifically to the feminist context, which was also developing there at the time. The experiential exercises or workshops that happened in the park were relating to the sculptures that are present in the park. And one is the Teatro Continuo by Burri, and the other one is Seduta Musicale by Aman. The very interesting opportunity for me was to relate to those sculptures and understand how my work effectively also uses similar approaches. And the similarities are really based on the way in which the audience is involved or can be involved, and so in a sense it sort of is the dialogic approach. The idea of care in society and how we should adopt a more caring role in societies have different connotations. So one of the things that interests me is the role of the carer or the person taking care, and how people can become carers in many different ways. So of course, you know, one thinks about motherhood when thinking about care, but that's not the only one, of course. There are many other works in society that are to do with taking care, including taking care of the city, taking care of the family, but also in education and so on. So the branch of care ethics really deals with that heavily, and so that was one of the ways in which these impacted my art practice was to develop the strategy of caring with, and caring with is what I define as the participatory approach I adopt through my dialogic sculptures. How much doing these exercises made you think about the recent constraints of kind of relating to one another due to COVID and due to, you know?
An important part of our lives now, and I think that I could think about when I first went out after the quarantine, and that I knew that my movements were influenced by other people's movements. For example, if a person came too close to me, I had to distance myself, and yeah, it was kind of the same exercise but in real life.
Yeah.
When we went out the first time after quarantine, we wanted to stay close because we had been distancing for a lot of months, but we knew we couldn't, and now it's kind of the same because it would be easier to do this job staying close, talking to each other, but we had to keep distance so the cloth wouldn't get.
How many people a day?
Oh, I think that there are days when you have hundreds of people here.
So we could say this is really one of the most used sculptures in a park because there are like thousands of human bodies interacting with it. And so I guess what I would find interesting to understand is how one can read this piece of urban art, public infrastructure, democratic infrastructure through a lens of care, which John Tronto, a political theorist, invites us to do, because she has like stages of caring. She talks about caring about, so we could actually ask, what does the sculpture care about? I mean, how does it care about what you call democracy, or what you referred to before as urban peace? I mean, how could this become a place where we think about peace and making peace? So I find that really interesting. And then Tronto says we also need to care for. So we don't only care about something, but we have to actually understand what such a piece needs, that it's being cared for, that it is kept alive, as you are saying. And then she has two more stages that are like care giving and care receiving. And if we abstract this from just human interaction and would say the sculpture needs to receive care but also gives care, that's what I would like to bring to an interpretation of it. And Elena Cologni, whom you also invited to be part of the conversation, she borrows the caring with notion from Tronto, which transitions it into a larger conversation of democratic care. So how care can be distributed in a much juster way amongst many people. And so I think if I were to curate a piece here, I would like to understand how it could be a performance of public caregiving, and how we could invite people to show their care for something that maybe they have used for many days in their lives. So I think I would like to research people who have a long relationship with this sculpture, who are attached to it, who have bonded with it, and who would like to give back some care. I think that's what I would like to envision.
Teatro Bure era uno spazio
Can I
di
give this to you?
Oh, ok, I have this one.
Oh, okay.
Era uno spazio di partecipazione, uno spazio aperto, costruito tra l'altro in anni appunto in cui lo spazio pubblico, si pensava che per lo spazio pubblico questi luoghi avrebbero potuto rappresentare veramente una differenza, un cambio di passo, e questo piccolo teatro che è stato costruito in via Corlezza è stato appunto demolito molto recentemente, peraltro con motivazioni molto simili, cioè che era degradato perché ospitava sostanzialmente dei graffiti. Però è interessante perché dal punto di vista anche del discorso della cura che si è fatto, è l'architetto con cui appunto in questa occasione è stato possibile chiacchierare e quindi conoscere più a fondo la storia di questo luogo, si è preso cura di questo spazio, era stato incaricato di progettare la riqualificazione di un incrocio in un'area appunto di risulta alle spalle di Via dei Meravigli, quindi stiamo parlando veramente di un luogo molto vicino, conoscendo la storia della città, cioè quindi essendo un po' il depositario della storia, della stratificazione anche della storia della città, aveva colto questa vocazione.
He took an archetype, the Greek theater, so it was very simple, and also he paid a lot of attention to the material, so he chose specific stone that has a history, and also the pavement was these little stones that are from the river, so he chose the materials in very sensitive and very pay a lot of attention.
Paola took photos of the Teatro Continuo while it was being rebuilt, which was interesting because she treated it as a theater, and so it was, well, from the architectural point of view, I think it was interesting the way it was built, but also the way she took the photos.
Because I image that the worker was actors. So you know the movement still through the photograph.
I think I know those.
It was a lot.
Yeah, have you shown? Where have you shown them?
The people pass through, and in this case, okay, please stay here, and maybe you can talk and you can stay here.
It's an invitation.
Yes, an invitation to stay. And then what it was interesting, because very close there is a little church of the Orthodox community from Russia, and since the church was really little, they used the theater during the ceremony, because there was no enough space inside.
And also the place was very intimate, in fact, because you had buildings around
and the garden. So you also have the trees behind the scenes.
It was really, it's incredible how these places are.
Was full of care, really. I think that he paid so much attention to the space, to hear the vocation of the space, and decided, and this was really perfect. I didn't know nothing about it. And then another thing is that he did it in the 85, so he realized that Milano was entering in a new phase of his since he participated in such a
less politics.
Yes, he was part of the scene, theatrical scene.
What happened in 85?
Berlusconi in 94, but it was the hedonistic explosion of the hedonistic.
They organized fashion.
So that happened in 85.
During the 80s, Milano was really, the 80s was the most flamboyant descent for Milano.
Aperitivo.
Yes.
One thing that we have spoken about before is that when we think about public parks as they came into being in the late 19th century as part of new urban and bourgeois infrastructures that represented a culture of bourgeois citizenship that appropriated specific imperial and aristocratic infrastructures. The park was actually equipped a lot with figurative sculpture at the very beginning. So representations, we could say, of living people like war heroes. So I live in Vienna, so I think like of the so-called People's Park, where there are a lot of war memorials actually. But then we also have a lot of allegoric representations, many of them turning to naked female bodies that stand for whatever allegory they stand for. So we don't have to go deeply into that. And I think what we discussed is that this kind of object, sculpture, place to be set on, but also to be looked at while people are sitting on it, represents a very specific shift that a monument or a sculpture, a public sculpture or a memorial is not only to be looked at, but actually to be touched and used and to become, inviting the public to become part of it for a certain moment, for a certain duration, if you will. And I guess people who live here in Milano, they might come here like every day and sit here and do things and take this for granted. And other people like me who are just visitors, they might come here once. And I guess if I were here alone, I wouldn't maybe even feel very comfortable to sit down. So I think I feel really sheltered that I'm with many other people. I mean, I think the subjectivities that are being invited to express themselves here are very different from subjectivities that are being formed with present-day infrastructures. So today I went to the Ghia Aurenti public space, and there are lots of different infrastructures that are all geared to working out so that bodies can perform physical fitness in public space. And that's what I observed there for quite a while. And I think it's really interesting to ask, what is the difference between bodily encounters between this infrastructure and human bodies and the bodily encounters of the fitness gear and the individualized subjects. And so even though we might say that the physical infrastructure is actually one, I mean the present day one is actually useful, I think it is not at all in the sense complex that it invites democratic interactions. I mean, democracy is never easy, no? Democracy is hard work, it's labor, it has to be negotiated, it's filled with conflict. It's not something that comes peacefully and easily. And so we could also say this infrastructure here can nourish complex interactions. And I would say the infrastructure I have witnessed today doesn't nourish complex interactions, but only physical fitness. And that is a different mindset, if you will. It's a different form of shaping the mind and the body. And here I would say it's very much up to those who are taking responsibility to their actions, even if they don't even think about the responsibility they are taking for their own actions. I mean, I think we could talk about different levels of being exclusionary. So I think there can also be moments of exclusion here in this democratic infrastructure. But I would say that the fitness equipment is much more exclusionary when we think about all the bodies that are not meant to use them. When we think about bodies of very young people, bodies of very old people, bodies of frail people, bodies of not able-bodied people, bodies of people who don't like to expose themselves. I would be someone, I mean, even if I want to exercise, I don't want other people to observe me when I do this. So I would say there is narcissism, but there's also voyeurism in these.
Of course.
So there's a meeting of narcissism and voyeurism, and they both lend themselves to cooperation, collaboration, negotiation, dialogue, encounter. And I think this is what I miss in what I observe today and what I find very problematic vis-a-vis the urban subjectivities or the urban citizenship that is embodied in these infrastructures on a symbolic level through the materiality and the function they represent.
I do totally agree, and I hope more works like this can survive and maybe be created, not like this for sure, time has passed, but the ideas that are embodied in these works are important. So long life to this.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And we don't always need new objects. I think we also need investment and care and financial and material resources to actually take the best care possible of good infrastructures that are already in place so that they can be there for those who want to engage with them and use them.
I agree.
Okay, great.
Thank you very much.